This is James Francis Peter Marsh. I'd like to talk to you about chastisement. It's a word I don't hear many preachers speaking about. Chastisement is a difficult thing. I know when I was first found by Jesus Christ in 1965, I felt so clean, I felt so pure. My motives had changed, my heart had changed. And I went back to the fellow that told me that Jesus loved me. His name was Bernie Garrity. And I said, I'll never sin again. I just feel so good. And he just sat there looking at me, smiling, and he said, no, you're wrong. You've got a lot to learn. And I just couldn't believe it that I could ever sin again. I felt so good. But in ignorance, I was speaking out of love for Jesus Christ, but I was just ignorant. Now, suppose you're going to run in a race, say a 100-yard dash. I work out with 15-pound dumbbells every day, and if I was going to run in a 100-yard dash, obviously I would not bring these dumbbells to the race. And the Apostle Paul said, lay aside every weight and sin that so easily entangles us, and let's run the race. And Paul knew what he was talking about. And I love the book of Hebrews that we're not sure who wrote it. I kind of think Paul did, but I can't say. There's no author other than Jesus Christ. But he's talking about people suffering, terrible suffering and losing their lives. And they were people of faith, that they were tortured and abused and sawn in two by a saw. They were mocked and ridiculed and scourged, and they had to travel about in goat skins and sheep skins and hide in caves. And these people all died in faith. You can't say they didn't have faith. They had faith, but they went through terrible suffering. And I'm speaking to people, some people that have suffered so much just in life. Life has dealt you a hard hand that you had to play out. And the exhortation is to embrace chastisement of the Lord. It's a hard thing to say, and it's a hard thing to experience. I know from that over 50 years ago, I felt so clean and pure. And I went that way for about 8 months. And then I had an experience that kind of changed the whole course of my life. I don't know if you remember where you were March 16th, 1966. Maybe you weren't even born yet. That was a Wednesday, and I remember exactly where I was. I was finishing basic training in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And this Wednesday night, I heard, basic training was very confining back then. You couldn't even hardly go across the street to the snack bar. But I heard there was a chapel service about a half a mile away. And I got permission from a sergeant, a night sergeant, that I could go to the chapel service. And I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell anybody in my barracks. I didn't tell any friends. I just went to the chapel service. And the person that was speaking, I felt like he was speaking right to me. And he said, your names are written in heaven. And he quoted from the gospel, rejoice that your name is written in heaven. And I thought, oh, yes. And walking home on that starry night to the barracks, I was looking up in the sky for my last name, Marsh, for the stars that were shaped like an M. And I was saying, oh, Lord, I love you, and I thank you for saving me and making me clean. And I love you with all my heart. And at that moment, the God's Spirit began to pour out on me like waves of love. And every wave brought another powerful presence of Jesus Christ's Spirit. And I felt like I was going to burst and explode in a million pieces, that every cell in my body would explode. I felt like I was lifted up. my heart was so full, and I said, "Oh, I love you," and I was crying, tears coming down my face, and my throat got tight, and I was groaning. And I read years later where Paul said the groaning was too deep for words, and that was me. And I felt like I was lifted up and that the stars were getting closer. And in a split second, almost like a flash of a camera, a light, I saw a corner of heaven, and I hate to even mention this, it was golden. And I saw long, straight trumpets. It was almost like seeing the balcony of heaven, a snap photograph in a dark room just lit up, boom, just for a second, maybe 2 seconds, and it was gone. And all I could say was, no. I should have said yes. I wish today that I had said yes. I felt like I was going to die and go there. But for some reason, I wasn't ready. There was something in me that said no. I don't know if it was some little pebble in my life that the enemy had planted because I came from a sinful life. And that spirit, when I said no, I just felt like I was going to die, and I just didn't want to die. But I still loved the Lord, and slowly those waves backed off. And from that moment on, my life was chastised, and I mean for 50 years. That's why I say I wish I had said yes. Maybe I would have gone and died and been with the Lord, but I said no when I should have said yes. And I was like the people in Exodus 19 when God said, I'm going to show up, told Moses to get the people clean and spend 3 days getting clean. And when you come near that mountain, don't touch it. And the Spirit of God came down in a whirlwind like a giant tornado with lightning and thunder and noise and trumpets and blasting and shaking and just like an earthquake. And the people backed up and they said, no, just like I did. And Moses said, no, stay here. God's not going to hurt you. He just wants to prove you. He wants to prove what's in you. And that's where chastisement comes from. If you read the book of Hebrews, you'll find in one chapter, you'll see 7 times he mentions chastisement. He said, despise not the chastening of the Lord. The Lord loves those who chastises. And he deals with us as sons. And if he chastises you and you don't take it, then you're illegitimate. You don't want to be that. And he related to earthly fathers that spanked us and chastised us. And they did it for their own pleasure. But he said that chastening does not seem joyous but grievous. But afterwards it produces fruit of righteousness. And Jesus said in Revelation, anyone that I reprove and rebuke, I love. He said, I love those that I receive. So when he spanks you, he's only trying to prove that your love is real. And after 50 years of hardship and suffering, I could say that Jesus Christ is love and that he cares about you and he cares about me. And yes, that dark spot in my life is vanished because that spanking and the chastisement of the Lord has cleansed me. And if he ever came to me again the way he did in 1966, my answer would be yes. And think about that, because someday you and I are going to come into his presence. We're going to breathe our last and come into his glorious light. And at that point, we want to say yes. And so I receive every aspect of chastisement that he offers because I know it's in love. And if you're suffering, you're having hardship in life, draw near to him. Draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. He'll bring his wonderful comfort, his care, and just embrace him in love and prayer. And I don't know if this makes sense. I'm kind of rambling today, but I care about you, and I share this with you in love. God bless you, and draw near to him.